Hey everyone, welcome to the movie Kraken. Hope you enjoy the watch. In the Arctic, two geologists, Oscar and Julia, are conducting field research, carrying out a series of deep-water detonations in the Nansen Basin. A storm is growing stronger, and the camp calls them, urging them to return immediately. At the same time, not far from their location, a state-of-the-art Russian submarine, Ataman Yermak, commanded by Captain Alexander Voronin, passes below. The crew suddenly detects an intense, unidentified noise. Moments later, to everyone's shock, the seafloor begins to rise. Meanwhile, Julia's instruments go haywire, and the ice around their tent heaves and cracks. Panicking, the scientists abandon everything and rush back toward the camp. But on the way, due to fresh fractures in the ice, Oscar loses control of the snowmobile and crashes it. Seconds later, he and Julia watch in horror as their camp is swallowed by the freezing water. Aboard the submarine, the crew discovers that the mysterious noise has a biological origin, and, following the captain's orders, they prepare for an evasive maneuver. However, something with tremendous force slams into them. The vessel shakes violently, tossing the crew in all directions. Despite the chaos, Alexander manages to launch an emergency buoy to the surface. Meanwhile, in the depths below, illuminated by flashes from the geological charges detonated earlier, enormous tentacles come into view. The sudden disappearance of the submarine Ataman Yermak leaves the Russian Navy's Central Command in complete confusion, since it was carrying an ultra-classified weapon that must not fall into the wrong hands under any circumstances. The High Command immediately dispatches another submarine, Zapolyarye, for the search mission. Its captain is appointed to be Viktor Voronin, the younger brother of the missing Alexander. Viktor prepares for the mission and says goodbye to his family, while his mother gives him their father's watch for good luck. That same night, at the port, he greets Rear Admiral Olshansky, whom the command has assigned as his second-in-command, with secret orders to remove Viktor from command should he begin making unsound decisions driven by emotion. The crew welcomes their commander at the main control center, and soon he is informed that the vessel is ready to depart. Meanwhile, Julia and Oscar are trying to call for help by contacting a Norwegian drilling platform, but due to the weak signal, no one can hear them, and the storm continues to intensify. In the morning, Zapolyarye reaches the designated location and begins its descent. At last, it's time to learn the details of the mission. Voronin opens the classified envelope and reads its contents to the command staff, after which the navigator plots a new course. The alarming news about the unbelievable disappearance of Ataman Yermak quickly spreads among the crew, and Olshansky warns Voronin to keep his emotions in check, otherwise he might cause serious trouble. Julia and Oscar find the submarine's emergency buoy buried in the snow and decide to stay near it, hoping for rescue. Soon, Zapolyarye detects the buoy's signal and changes course. After some time, the vessel is suddenly surrounded by a pod of whales, which greatly surprises the crew. Olshansky tells Voronin to use the sonar to drive them away, but Viktor first attempts to dive deeper to avoid harming the animals. When one of the whales scrapes against the hull, he finally gives the order to use a low-power impulse. The whales look terrified, almost as if they're trying to warn the humans about something. Suddenly, the animals begin to flee, and a low-frequency, unclassified noise is detected across the entire horizon. An unknown object begins rising from the seafloor, and Olshansky firmly tells Voronin, "Fire the torpedoes." Viktor refuses, saying they don't know what the object is or how it might respond. Instead, he orders the boatswain to take shelter in the nearest ice channel. The submarine squeezes through the narrow gap, scraping against icy ridges, and barely manages to stop before an ice wall, just moments before impact. The mysterious object pursuing them then leaves the submarine alone. While the crew assessed the damage, Olshansky unleashed his outrage on Voronin, believing that he had grossly violated protocol and unnecessarily put the team at risk. The submarine continued toward the emergency buoy and soon surfaced nearby. Seeing the two survivors, Voronin and part of the crew went out to meet them. Once Viktor confirmed that Julia and Oscar were unarmed, he inspected the buoy and listened to their account of the camp's destruction. Olshansky bluntly told him that these people could be saboteurs and shouldn't be taken aboard. It would be better to leave them some food and a means of communication, letting them call for help themselves. Realizing they weren't being rescued, the geologists ran toward the submarine, waving their arms. Moved by sympathy, Victor once again ignored the Rear Admiral's advice and ordered his boatswain to bring the survivors aboard. Since the emergency buoy had been located, the captain gave the order to dive and begin searching the area. Julia and Oscar were examined in the medical bay and then served a hot meal in the mess hall. Victor joined them there to get acquainted and to ask more about the incident on the ice floe. During the conversation, it was revealed that Julia is fluent in Russian, having been born in Omsk, but moved to Sweden with her scientist parents. Oscar is her French colleague from the International Geological Expedition. Victor continued asking about their research and concluded that the detonations from their charges could have sunk his brother's submarine. The crew discusses their next steps. Olshansky insists on returning to base to report the situation to headquarters. Since there is an active threat in the area and they cannot call for assistance due to malfunctioning antennas, it would be too risky to endanger the team. However, Victor again ignores the Rear Admiral's advice and orders the navigator to plot a course to the geologists' camp. Displeased with this decision, Olshansky pulls Voronin aside and warns him that one more wrong move, and he will relieve him of his command duties. After the unpleasant conversation, Victor tells his boatswain that they need to hurry, because if there are survivors on the Yermak, their remaining oxygen supplies are limited. To search for the missing submarine, they decide to use sonar. As soon as the sonar is activated, a gigantic, unknown object begins pursuing the submarine again. The captain immediately orders the vessel to take cover among a cluster of icebergs, but suddenly the object changes course and heads straight for the Norwegian drilling platform directly in their path. Shortly thereafter, surfacing to periscope depth, the entire crew watches in horror as the enormous creature crashes onto the platform. After destroying it, the monster once again turns its attention toward the Zapolyarye. By the captain's order, the submarine immediately dives to escape the pursuer. However, Olshansky, convinced that Voronin has once again made the wrong decision, relieves him of command and orders a torpedo attack on the enemy. After 2 unsuccessful salvos, which apparently inflict no damage on the monster, the Rear Admiral is left stunned, unsure of what to do next. Seeing his hesitation, Voronin resumes command and dives the submarine deeper. But the sudden maneuver causes him to fall and hit his head. A sudden strike from a tentacle hits the hull, igniting a fire in the torpedo compartment. Sailors immediately shut off ventilation and seal the compartment, leaving 7 crew members trapped inside. Meanwhile, the submarine rapidly approaches its crush depth, beyond which the hull cannot withstand the pressure and the entire crew would perish. Victor orders the ballast tanks to be blown to stabilize depth, but the monster seems to sense them, looming over the vessel with its massive body. The captain then commands silence mode and even forbids the sailors from extinguishing the fire. Another strike could destroy the submarine. Julia and Oscar hear the bulkheads creaking under the immense pressure. A sudden, piercing noise, emitted by the creature, ruptures the eardrum of one crew member. But soon, the object, having lost sight of them, begins moving away in the opposite direction. Meanwhile, the fire has grown too intense, so Voronin orders the scorched sailors to leave the compartment and extinguish the blaze using Freon. Now, the crew is left defenseless. Later, in the medical bay, all the injured receive treatment, and Julia, who is helping out there, learns that it was Voronin, not Olshansky as she had previously thought, who rescued her and Oscar and brought them aboard the submarine. She also overhears sailors talking about the deep-sea monster that has begun hunting them. Meanwhile, Victor reviews the crew's report on the condition of the vessel and its personnel and makes the difficult decision to return to base. Back in his quarters, he nostalgically reads the last letter his late father left him, when Julia arrives to share her hypothesis. First, she points to the location on a map where her camp had been and where the detonations occurred. Then she explains that, according to legends and ancient manuscripts, people across different centuries described a creature the size of an island that sank their ships. Eventually, it disappeared, seemingly entering a state of dormancy. This monster was a cephalopod mollusk known to all as the KRAKEN. Julia suggests that the geologist's detonations at the edge of the basin may have awakened it and advises the captain not to use sonar, as these sounds irritate and attract the Kraken. When Victor asks where he should search for his brother, Julia explains that octopuses usually drag their prey to their lairs, so the search should focus on the area where the detonations took place. Their conversation is suddenly interrupted by two men claiming they've discovered something. Before the Kraken's noise could deafen the operator, he hears a faint metallic knock at a different frequency. After reviewing the recording, the captain and boatswain check the map and determine that the sound came from the basin near the geologist's camp. This meant only one thing: there were survivors on the Yermak. Victor changes the plan and delivers an inspiring speech to the crew, emphasizing that they must complete their original mission assigned by command and, despite the mortal danger, save human lives. The submarine alters its course and eventually enters the search area. The captain orders a deeper dive, but after rivets start popping from the hull due to pressure, he abandons the attempt. Directly beneath them lies a massive trench, reportedly more than 5,000 meters deep. To descend further, a bathyscaphe will be needed, so Victor calls its commander, Valery Koshkin, to the control center. Upon arrival, Koshkin reports that his partner is out of commission and requires a replacement. With experience piloting such a vessel, Voronin temporarily transfers command duties to Olshansky and takes a seat in the bathyscaphe himself. Soon, the bathyscaphe detaches from the mother vessel and descends to a depth of over 1,800 meters. The hull begins to creak under the pressure, but the team continues the search and discovers an entire graveyard of ships, among them the wrecked submarine Ataman Yermak. Miraculously, the forward section of the vessel remains intact, allowing the bathyscaphe to dock. Voronin locates the surviving crew members, including his older brother. The Zapoliarye crew cheers. Alexander recounts to his brother how the creature dragged their submarine along the seafloor and how he had ordered the crew to maintain silence, sending a short knock every 4 hours as a signal. Upon learning that there are 39 survivors, Victor regretfully informs them that they cannot all be rescued at once. He decides to stay with his brother, and a mechanic experienced with the bathyscaphe takes his place. Koshkin leaves a beacon on the submarine for easier location later, but his assistant reminds him that the sound might attract the Kraken, so it's better to turn it off. The survivors are brought aboard the Zapoliarye and receive medical attention. The mechanic suddenly falls ill and is unable to return to the basin, and without a second operator, Koshkin refuses to dive again. Hearing this, Julia pleads with Oscar to help, since he served on a submarine for 4 years and knows how to operate such vessels. Reluctantly, Koshkin agrees to accept the foreigner's assistance and descends into the basin again. Meanwhile, the crew of the Zapoliarye detects a distant noise rapidly approaching them. At the same time, Victor, together with his brother, retrieves access codes from the safe and somehow activates the systems on the Yermak to neutralize the secret weapon. But upon hearing in his headset the signal indicating the Kraken's approach, he decides to postpone its destruction, reasoning that the weapon might still be useful. Following Olshansky's orders, the sonar monitor displays the image of the massive sea creature dangerously close to them. The crew maneuvers the submarine into a narrow crevice, but at this critical depth, the hull cannot withstand the pressure, and one of the compartments begins flooding. At the same time, during docking, the bathyscaphe accidentally strikes the beacon left by Koshkin, which activates and emits a sound that distracts the Kraken from the Zapoliarye. Once the monster swims away, the rear admiral immediately orders an emergency surfacing. Julia cries upon hearing that the creature has returned to its lair. Victor tracks the Kraken's approach and, taking the codes and weapon launch key from his brother, moves through a ventilation shaft into the semi-flooded torpedo compartment. Meanwhile, the bathyscaphe docks, and the remaining crew members leave the flooded submarine, except for Alexander, who stays behind to await a signal from his brother. There are 2 minutes left until the system is fully loaded, and meanwhile the Kraken has already reached the submarine, wrapping its massive tentacles around it. The brothers speak over the radio, asking each other for forgiveness for all past grievances, in case they don't make it out alive. Finally, the system is ready, and they press their buttons simultaneously. A powerful beam pierces the creature, tearing it apart and shooting upward through the water and ice, exiting beyond the atmosphere. The submarine begins to flood rapidly. Victor initiates the weapon's self-destruction protocol and leaves the compartment. He and his brother have only 5 minutes to escape before the explosion. They move toward the bathyscaphe. But as the submarine suddenly tilts, Victor loses sight of Alexander. Fortunately, he quickly finds his brother, and together they climb aboard. The submarine breaks free and plunges into the abyss. However, the bathyscaphe cannot detach due to jammed clamps. Listening to Victor, Alexander pulls the emergency lever and manages to separate the vessel just seconds before the explosion, the shockwave throwing it upward with tremendous force. Meanwhile, the crew of the Zapoliarie has been waiting on the surface, nearly losing hope. But when the bathyscaphe surfaces nearby, no one can contain their emotions. Having completed their mission, the team heads home, where their loved ones eagerly await them. For even more stories like this, subscribe to the channel. The adventure never ends. See you soon.